So I think start with the short-term outlook first. Well, there's two good news. I think number one is that the global economic outlook is the best, the healthiest it's been since the global financial crisis of 2008. All right. So we're seeing the strongest economic growth, the most synchronized economic growth in 10 years around the world. 75% of all the countries in the world right now are growing, right, are posting positive growth. 75% of all the countries in the world right now are showing positive economic growth. For the first time in many years, every single one of the members of the G20 are posting positive economic growth, right? And that hasn't happened in a long time. So I think the external environment for Indonesia and developing countries is the most positive it's been in easily 7, 9, or 10 years. It's reflected in our exports, which are booming, right? So for the first 9 months of the year, our exports are up high teens, something like 17% year on year. And it's also reflected in robust investment inflows. Total investment is up mid-teens year on year, so about 13% year on year. And a lot of that is thanks to the extremely positive external environment. The second positive news is that I think after 3 years of hard work on economic reforms, we're finally seeing the results of those reforms. I think we're hitting record highs in survey after survey after survey, right? From World Bank Ease of Doing Business survey to United Nations UNCTAD survey of multinational executives around the world, to the global ratings agencies, S&P, Moody's, and Fitch, even things like the Edelman Trust Index, most recently in our airline safety rankings, we jumped from 150 to like 55, right? So I think 3 years of hard work on economic reform, on changing the mindset in the bureaucracy, on the nuts and bolts of the economy, I think we're seeing those efforts starting to pay off. I think, look, of course we want the economy to grow. Of course we want to create wealth. But I think we have to take the lessons of the last 10 years around the world very seriously about the dangers of inequality, right? Inequality is incredibly corrosive to a society. I think we've seen the rise of populism around the world, right? And that comes from huge frustrations of the bottom 70% whose incomes and household wealth has stagnated, while the top 5% have really captured almost all of the gains from economic growth. So if you ask me what would be our vision for Indonesia 2045, I would say number one thing is a just society, right? So I personally would not necessarily even aim for the highest economic growth rate or the biggest GDP in the world, because I do feel those things can overheat and backfire if that economic growth is not equitable, right? If the majority of the benefits of economic growth don't go to the majority of society, which means the bottom 70%, right? So I think above all things, I would want our country 100 years after independence to be a just society. Because without that, we will have so many difficulties with division among groups, division among the elites and the rest of society, and popular frustration breeding an unhealthy environment that eventually creates bad politics and bad policy, right? Benefits in 2045 will be very different compared to benefits in 1945, right? But maybe in some ways, many of the same things apply. For example, we all want to be healthy, right? We all should be a wise society with a positive culture. I think technology and development can definitely create wealth, can definitely grow the economy, but it will take very proactive and conscious efforts to make sure that technology and development benefit the bottom 70% first, right? I think left to its own devices, left to the wild, right? To completely wild market forces, right, if you will, you're going to get very unequal society, and you're going to get backlash from the bottom 70% that translates into populism or support for demagogues and populists, right, who peddle lies and deceptions. So I think we should really take our time and put in the extra effort to boost the bottom 70%, irrespective of the possibility that we might sacrifice extremely high economic growth rates in order to maintain social justice. You're absolutely right. Eventually, what is at the root of social justice and social equity, right, or equality? We're not trying to achieve, and it would be impossible and misguided to achieve an equality of outcome, right? It's unrealistic to try to make everyone equally wealthy, right? What one can do is give everyone equal opportunity. We don't want any segments of society to be handicapped by bad health, by bad education, by bad infrastructure. We don't want good health to be something that's only available to the rich. We don't want good education and exposure to the world to be something that is only available to the rich. We don't want good infrastructure, clean water, abundant and affordable electricity to be available only to the rich, right? I think by focusing healthcare, education, and infrastructure on the poor or even the working class and the middle class, we would create an equality of opportunity. When I was chair of the National Christmas Committee in 2015, one of our activities for National Christmas was a charitable activity, Bakti Sosial, to a school for poor children in Kupang, East Nusa Tenggara, something that my dear wife put on the program and worked hard to support. So with the humble president, the simple president that we have, we don't want luxurious Christmas celebration, but more socially, oriented, more charitably oriented Christmas. And we went to this school in Kupang, and I think the principal of the school gave the speech that I will remember for the rest of my life. And she said that the only thing the poor people in that village needed, there's only one thing that they need, and that is to be given a chance, right? It's just to be given an opportunity. The rest, they can figure out for themselves. And to me, that was deeply striking because it's true. Many of the children in the school were very talented, very energetic and enterprising, but they just need to be given a chance, right? They need to be given access to business opportunities, to internet connections, to equipment and networks, and also not be held back unfairly by bad health, by bad infrastructure, by lack of access to good education, and the rest, the human spirit will take care of itself. I believe the Indonesian people are naturally entrepreneurial, are naturally enterprising, and we just need to support them, right? The last thing we need to do is to try to regulate them or try to force them or micromanage them. Government's job is to create the basic infrastructure, right? To take care of the basics like utilities, water, electricity, transport, and then health, public health, public education. And then in many ways, our job is to get out of the way. Let the people do what they want to do, which is to make a better life for themselves. So first, we should start by not assuming that wireless data networks, 3G networks, 4G networks, and soon 5G networks will naturally blanket the entirety of Indonesia. We have a fairly unhealthy telecom sector at the moment. Yes, it's posting high growth rates, but it is over-dominated by one single company, which is a state enterprise, which is Telkomsel, right? And that's causing bandwidth prices to be too high in those places where they don't have competition, and too low in places where they are allowed to crush their competitors with below market pricing, right? And over time, that will prevent a balanced and healthy telecom sector that would generate sustainable profits that can over time be reinvested in good networks that are evenly spread. So, we have a big challenge in rebalancing the telecom sector to be a healthier competition, because right now I believe just one company is capturing more than 90% of the entire industry's profits, right? That will not lead to an evenly spread, high quality wireless data network. And that's the first prerequisite for the digital revolution, for the industrial revolution 4.0 and what have you. There's also plenty of other bad policies that we have to fix at the moment. But I just wanted to raise that as an important homework we still have to do. But assuming that we do get the policies right and 4G networks and 5G networks blanket the whole country, we have to create a lot of policy space for experimentation. As President Jokowi has mentioned several times, innovation requires experimentation. That's the number one basic principle behind innovation. Innovation cannot be created by regulation. Innovation cannot be forced. Innovation comes naturally by people trying many, many new things, of which most things fail. In e-commerce, in digital startups, the failure rate will be 70% to 90%, right? What we see today, the Googles, the Amazons, the Facebooks, are in that 10% that succeeded. But imagine if the American government had not given the freedom for innovators to experiment and to fail safely, then there would be no innovation from that 10% of the survivors. So in the bureaucracy, we still have this mindset that our job is to regulate. Actually, nothing could be further from the truth. Regulation is a necessary evil, that is required to be kind of like traffic signs or traffic lights, right? Just to set forth some basic rules of engagement, right? But beyond that, we should not seek to regulate everything there is, right? That will actually kill innovation, that will actually stifle innovation. What we need to give is the freedom for people to experiment and try different things and not immediately want to say, oh, that needs to be regulated. I think fintech is a perfect example. And I guess I'll take this opportunity, Shoaib, to point out that unless we take a deregulation-oriented approach, right? Unless we take a freedom-oriented approach to e-commerce and the digital economy, our own people, eventually all 256 million of them, will leave us behind, leave us, the government, behind, right? Why? Because as any economy in the world develops, its economy will shift towards the services sector. Services like education, like healthcare, and like financial services. Now, services are most easily transferred to the internet. And as President Jokowi has emphasized on so many occasions, the internet is naturally borderless. The internet means the death of distance. The internet is inherently global, right? Once our people go to the internet, we will not be able to regulate them, right? They will find all kinds of services, the best services available anywhere in the world. And not only will we not be able to regulate them, we won't even know it's happening, right? So financial services, for example, say for argument's sake that tomorrow we banned Visa and MasterCard. Just to use two examples. There's many others like JCB Card, Union Pay from China, American Express, PayPal, and so on. It would only be a matter of time until some enterprising innovator comes up with a virtual Visa card and a virtual MasterCard, which show up on a Indonesian consumer's mobile as an app, right? And with very few taps of the app, that consumer might transfer a certain sum of money into an overseas bank account. And then all the transactions done over the virtual Visa or the virtual MasterCard might be offshore overseas, right? Even among Indonesians, right? So Indonesians could transact with each other using offshore finance facilitated by digital apps. And we wouldn't even know about it, right? Until it's too late. These things have a way of then going viral, and we would only find out once there's already 30 million Indonesian consumers, right? And by then it's too late. Say we try to regulate it out of existence, we try to kill it, we would have massive demonstrations from 30 million extremely happy consumers, right? So what would happen then? We can't stop it. It's happened. It's all happening overseas and offshore, right? Why? Because we killed it onshore with regulations, with bad policy, right? So that is a danger. I think excessive regulation and bad policy risks driving everything to the internet. And once it's on the internet, it'll be in the wild, and it'll be global, it'll be offshore, beyond our reach. Already, I believe hundreds of thousands of our Indonesian consumers are taking online courses and studying using online resources every day of every week, right? And we don't regulate those sources of online instruction or online courses or online education, right? We don't even know it's happening. So again, the risk is if we don't keep up, if we don't modernize our policy, don't cut our regulations, don't make it super friendly and super easy to be onshore inside Indonesia in the official economy, in the formal sector, our people will just leave us behind and go into the informal sector, into the unofficial economy, onto the internet, offshore, where they are beyond our reach. Yes, it could potentially hollow out our tax base, right? Because not only would we not be able to reach our people there in cyberspace offshore and regulate them, we would also not be able to tax them very well, right? We would be able to tax the people, right? But we would, for example, not be able to tax the companies, the providers, because they don't market to Indonesians, they don't sell to Indonesians. Indonesians are going to them, right? They're operating out of tax-friendly, regulatorily friendly jurisdictions, and there's very little we would be able to do about it. People have, almost everyone has a misconception of what it means to have a large market, right? Or have a large country and a large society. I think the key phrase is actually the one you just mentioned, which is critical mass, right? Innovation tends to come from the most imaginative 1% of any population, right? But having 260 million people means that 1% is a lot of people, right? That's really what it means to have a large population or a large country. So 1% of 260 million people would be 2.6 million people, which is half of the entirety of the population of Singapore, for example, right? That's a lot of innovators. The key for any government would be to support these innovators to the max, right? To give them almost anything they want, anything they need, right? To get out of the way. And for us to do that, we really have to complete President Jokowi's mindset revolution. Because right now, in the elites of government, business, finance, really the elites in Indonesia, the rent-seeking mindset is very deeply rooted and very widespread, right? When we see innovators or success, our elites' first instinct is how to extort something from that success or that innovator, right? How to get a piece of it, rather than how to support it, or how to clear the way for it, right? As we know, the country continues to be hostage, as are many countries, or possibly even most countries in the world, are hostage to vested interests. And really, it's the moral responsibility of the leadership, the political leadership, the academic leadership, the religious leadership, the social leadership, the business leadership, to protect the innovators, right? To support the innovators, to create freedom for the innovators, to move the whole system forward, to move the whole society forward, and not allow vested interests or narrow interests or corrupt interests from sucking the innovators dry, right? From making life so frustrating for our innovators that they move to a neighboring country, right? That they move overseas and take their talent and their technology and their ideas to other countries, or they just give up entirely in frustration. So that's really our key challenge. I think property and real estate is extremely fundamental to any economy, in any century, in any cycle, in any era, right? President Jokowi recently quoted this fundamental principle, which is that internet means the death of distance, but it does not mean the death of location, right? Everybody still wants to be in that hot spot, in that hot location, right? And as you know, in retail, a lot of times people say location, 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 right? Number one issue is location, number two issue is location, number three issue is location, right? So even though internet has meant the death of distance, all the talented people still want to meet up in a particular place. Everybody wants to be in New York City. Everybody wants to be in San Francisco. Everybody wants to be in Chicago and what have you. Everybody wants to be in Jakarta. Everybody wants to be in Bali. Everybody wants to be in Yogyakarta, and so on. So I think a few things. The job of the property and real estate sector is to create that hot location, right? That Silicon Valley-like, or Silicon Alley, or the place where it's cool and hip and sexy for the talented and imaginative people to be, right? Hollywood, Bollywood, Gurgaon, Hyderabad, London, the city of London, and it can be created from scratch. Dubai was nothing 25 years ago. It's a serious hotspot today, right? And more and more people now know that my undergraduate degree, my S1, was in urban planning and city planning, right? Urban design, city planning. So I think a few highlights of what it takes to be that cool, hip, sexy location. Number one, pedestrian friendly. I think density, right? Very closely packed clusters where people can walk and bicycle around is absolutely key, right? Because the most talented people for whom the most precious commodity is time, they cannot afford to lose a lot of time in traffic jams and the like, right? They also cannot afford to put up with the frustrations of traffic jam, polluted cities and the like. So they will want the urban lifestyle that is healthy, time efficient, and frustration free. And that basically means very pedestrian friendly, very bicycle friendly, right? There was a Bloomberg article a few months ago that the new ultimate perk is walking to work or bicycling to work, right? And there's a famous phrase from one of the leading urban designers of all time, which is the mayor of Bogota, Colombia, the inventor of the bus lane, right, the busway system. And he said that in a civilized society, in a truly prosperous society, it's not that everybody can have cars, but that the rich take public transport, right? And I think that's a really good illustration. If you go to New York, if you go to London, if you go to Hong Kong, if you go to Singapore, even among the richest people there, they take the subway, they take a taxi, they take the bus, right? And are extremely happy to do so. So that is a mark of the ultimate achievement of a society, of a civilization, is when the rich and all the elites regularly and happily take public transport every day and every week, right? It's not that, if you're looking at a society where even the poor have cars, that will not be a just or healthy society, right? Because reliance on cars will breed obesity, will breed pollution and traffic jams, whereas reliance on walking, bicycling and public transport promotes physical activity, therefore good health, promotes lack of pollution and clean air and less emissions, and that's what's going to define the sexy, hot location in the 21st century. And that's both the job and I think the opportunity for the real estate players, the property developers, and I think that's what's going to differentiate the winners from the losers, is creating those hot locations. Well, first, we have to stop making it so difficult for them to come, right? A top 5 complaint of investors is the difficulty of getting work permits and entry visas for international professionals and international talent. It continues to be an incredibly inefficient and bureaucratic, and many people will say corrupt system. So I think fixing the work permit, work visa, long stay visas process is the first thing we have to do in the next few years. The second thing is, look, in order for Indonesia to retain its best talent and attract the world's best talent, all we have to do is be ourselves, right? I believe one of the greatest strengths of Indonesia is the natural sincerity of its people, the natural warmth and sympathy, the charisma of our people, right? And that natural charisma and likability is rooted in our open-mindedness, our openness, our tolerance, yes, our moderation, our imagination and humor. And I think that's what President Jokowi is fighting so hard to protect, right? By fighting for our moderation, our openness, our tolerance, right? Openness requires tolerance, right? You have to be tolerant of different kinds of people, not only around the world, but inside the country. That's what openness is, right? To preserve those things requires that we fight to protect our moderation and our tolerance. And once we maintain that, we are naturally the most likable people in the world. As you know, I travel the world constantly as the Republic's salesman-in-chief, and I get no other comment more often, which is that Indonesians are the nicest people, the best people in the world, right? Whether it's in the Middle East or in North Asia or in America, anybody who's been exposed to Indonesians say they are so nice, they are so creative, they have great humor, and we just love them, right? But I think it's more of a struggle than a lot of people realize for any society in any country to keep its soul, right? There's many temptations, there's many ways for a society to go down the wrong path. And I think even some of the richest and most modern countries in the world right now are struggling to save their soul, right? To stick to their roots that made them successful, which was openness, tolerance, respect for opposite opinions, respect for different points of view, and keeping things positive and constructive. Many of the richest and most successful countries in the world right now are fighting the temptation to go negative, to go on the attack, to be offensive and defensive rather than open and constructive. So again, I think I'm a big believer of back to basics. Let's make sure we get those things right first. Our young Indonesians are so naturally innovative, so naturally embracing of technology. I don't think I have to worry about that, right? Our young society is famously technology friendly, famously early adopters of new technologies. So that's something we can rest assured. I think what I would remind our youth is that, you know, there's an old saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Throughout the centuries, throughout many different cycles of technology and innovation, the most important things in life are still friendship, are still family, you know, are still memories and inspiration and sadness and wisdom and courage. You know, when anybody comes to the end of their lives, those are the things that they will take to their grave, right? Is being proud of those moments when they had to exhibit courage, right? When they were able to at least try to defend those who could not defend themselves, right? Those moments when we were able to help our fellow human being, those were the things that truly define our lives at the end of it, right? So I think even as we go giddy, we go dizzy with the pace of innovations, right? Drones, self-driving cars, artificial intelligence, right? Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant, Facebook M, as our machines talk back to us as we go into, you know, flying cars or robotic home delivery and so on. You know, at the end, we're still chasing the same thing, right? We still need, above all, friendship. We still want, or should want, above all, family, you know. And maybe the definition of family will evolve over time, but it's still family, right? I think having offspring, right, raising children, will always be one of the most fulfilling, most inspiring, and most mind-blowing things one can do with one's life. Now, not to belittle or in any way disparage people who cannot or do not have children, but I think it's worth keeping in mind these realities and not be distracted. Technology will forever be evolving. There will be a hot, sexy new thing every 10, every 20, every 30 years. But throughout time, what will be most important for human beings will remain, friendship, family, courage, love, inspiration, sadness, wisdom, right? So we have to protect those things at all costs from the from the temptations, the seductions, because again, it's so easy to go down the wrong path. A lot of technologies, a lot of innovations can be very seductive. They can actually prey on our addictions and our worst instincts, right? Outrage, anger, jealousy, all those things can be very tempting and even addictive, profit motive can even try to monetize the addictive nature of anger, of jealousy, of resentment, of indulgence, materialism. We have to constantly remind ourselves that what is truly important in life is not that jealousy, it's not that anger, resentment, hatred, but it's actually, courage, wisdom, family, honor. Those take humility and eventually wisdom. It's very worthwhile everybody putting their phones down from time to time. I would recommend, once a week, and actually take a big step back and think about friends, think about family, and not in a social media sort of way, right? But what can I do for my friends right now? What can I do for my parents right now? What can I do for my kids right now? What can I do to make the world a better place, leave behind a better world? One other risk of this digital economy, the always online society, is we get very busy, or we get very frantic, and very dizzy with stuff, right? That we forget that actually, those are not the things that ultimately define our lives, or are the truly important things in life. And I think we do need a digital detox, a wise step back to contemplate, to meditate on life, on friendship, on family, and on humanity, right? And even on morality. What do we consider right? What do we consider wrong? If we do that, that's probably our best assurance that technology empowers us, and to make sure that technology doesn't destroy us.